Hey everybody, this is the video to help you with the Langston Hughes picture book assignment part 1. So watch this if you need help, just want me to read through it with you, or if you need help understanding what the questions are, if they're confusing. The purpose of this is to continue learning about the nonfiction story, I guess I should write nonfiction life of Langston Hughes to see how his experiences show up in his fictional work and poems. We read one of his poems yesterday. We're going to be reading a short story that he wrote next week. So the story we're reading today about him, written by Floyd Cooper, is called Coming Home. So it's similar to that Zora Neale Hurston picture book, but it is about Langston Hughes. So this is in the first page of the book. Sorry, I know it's kind of weird having it all digital, but obviously this is how it has to be with our situation. So this is a poem Langston Hughes did write. So we're going to read this and then answer this question. So the poem's called Hope. Sometimes when I'm lonely, don't know why, keep thinking I won't be lonely by and by. So read this poem from his biography. Why was he lonely? Think about what we just learned yesterday and the day before from his biography. So this is a sentence starter. You can change this if you need to. But from reading the biography of Langston Hughes, I know he was lonely because blank. So this is an example of how authors, like real lives and experiences, shape their writing. So he has experienced loneliness, so this shows up in his poem. That's kind of the purpose of learning about their life and then their works, because you're going to be having the chance to create your own artwork using your experiences too, which we'll get into not probably the end of next week, but don't worry about that yet. All right. James Langston Hughes was a dreamer there in Lawrence, Kansas, where he lived alone with his grandma Mary Langston. Langston was a dreamer in the fields behind the two-room house he shared with her, or on the porch. His grandma didn't much like him playing with the neighborhood kids, so he'd hear kids playing ball or riding bikes, but he'd stay put. Mostly in his early years, James Langston Hughes was alone. So the question for this one, does this scene of Langston Hughes remind you of anything we learned about Zora? Think about it. Refer to her picture book. What did she do in the Chinaberry tree? So how is this? Remember, this is Zora Neale Hurston in the Chinaberry tree. How does that similar to this situation with Langston Hughes? What is something that they are thinking, they experienced? What's similar? Respond here. All right. Hold on. Let me just make that a little easier. All right. Moving on. Unless the distant, faint, familiar sound of the freight train pressed against his ears, then Langston would bolt off the porch, hit the ground running, chickens a flutter. Quick, past the woodshed, swoop around the pump for drawing water. He'd hurry across the vacant lot and through the wheat field. He'd run and run until between breaths he could see the big freighter pulling its load around the curve of tracks, whistle blowing sweet as it screeched and clanked. Clackety, clackety, clackety. The old rusty cars talking. So look at this part in particular, this second paragraph. What types of figurative language were used? There's more than one, so which circle all that fit. You can just multiple, copy and paste if you need to. Control C, Control V to copy and paste, by the way. All right, moving on. The old iron snaked... That's kind of confusing. The old iron snake to tell him its stories about the places it'd been. Langston would talk back, dream back. He'd dream of riding the train to Mexico, where his pa, James Nathaniel Hughes, went to live after they wouldn't let him be a lawyer in Oklahoma because he was a black man. He'd dream of riding to where his ma, Carrie Hughes, was trying to be an actress on stage. He loved going to the theater with her those times because he'd had the chance to be with her. Mostly, he dreamed of the three of them together, of having a home with his ma and pa. A home he would never have to leave. But each time the train would trail off, getting quieter and quieter still, engine smoke barely clinging to the blue sky before it disappeared, Langston's dreams disappeared too. So think about reading that article yesterday. There was a question about his father when he went to Mexico. So focus on just this first paragraph. Is there any information there that would help us understand why his father had disdain or dislike for his culture? That was one of the questions yesterday. I mentioned that was kind of a tough question. Hopefully this helps you understand it more. Just think about how damaging and destructive racism can be when it's making somebody that's despised their own culture because of how other people are telling them their culture is. Okay, that's kind of what this is getting at. So answer these questions in this section here. If you're still confused, just feel free to email me, Schoology, message me, let me know, and I can help. All right, last slide for today. Living with Grandma wasn't easy. She was poor. Dinner was often dandelion greens and whatever the neighbors passed over the backyard fence. Sometimes the neighbors passed clothes too, their used dresses, worn shirts, and old shoes. Once Langston had to wear a woman's shoes because his grandma couldn't buy him new ones. But Grandma believed a boy needed heroes, and one day she took Langston all the way to Topeka to hear Booker T. Washington speak. Booker T. Washington in person, and she would read to young Langston and storytell. Sometimes she'd read from the Bible. Other times it would be a beautiful tale from the Brothers Grimm. Okay, so in this passage, the author uses allusions or famous references. We learned that's what allusions are. Your job is to research either Booker T. Washington or the Brothers Grimm. So just Google them, research some stuff about them. Booker T. Washington, see who he was, or read about what the Brothers Grimm was. Read about either of these people and share what they were famous for, and then introduce with a sentence starter. So like Booker T. Washington was famous for blank. Start your thing like that. Okay? Don't just copy and paste. You need to write it in your own words. All right, that's all for this assignment today. Hopefully that does not take you too long. I don't want this to be stressful. When you're done or before this, practice that vocabulary for the quiz tomorrow. All right, let me know if you need any other help. I got your back. Bye, everybody.